Why would a British general deliberately sideline his American allies in the middle of a crucial Allied invasion? The answer lies in the scorching summer of 1943 on the sun-baked hills of Sicily, where pride, strategy, and ambition collided in one of the most controversial episodes of the Second World War. On July 10, 1943, Operation Husky commenced, the largest amphibious assault in history up to that point. Over 160,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Sicily, marking the first major invasion of Axis-controlled Europe. Leading this massive undertaking were two of the war's most complicated personalities, British General Bernard Montgomery and American Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. What followed would test not just the Axis defenders, but the very foundation of Allied cooperation itself. The strategic importance of Sicily cannot be overstated. This island fortress guarded the Mediterranean's central passage, and its capture would open shipping lanes, provide airfields for bombing the Italian mainland, and potentially knock Italy out of the war entirely. For the Allies, it was the essential next step after their North African victories. For the Axis, it was a line that absolutely could not be broken. The invasion plan divided Sicily between two armies. Montgomery's British Eighth Army, veterans of El Alamein and the Desert Campaign, would land on the southeastern beaches near Syracuse and drive north up the eastern coast toward the ultimate prize, the port city of Messina. Lieutenant General George Patton's U.S. Seventh Army, still largely untested in European combat, would land to the west and southwest, tasked primarily with protecting Montgomery's left flank and securing the western portion of the island. From the very beginning, the plan reflected the British view that dominated Allied planning in 1943. Montgomery, Britain's most celebrated general, was given what he considered the main effort, the direct route up Highway 114 along the coast to Messina. The Americans, despite fielding nearly equal numbers, were assigned what many perceived as a secondary, supporting role. Patton, a cavalryman at heart who believed in aggressive mobile warfare, chafed under these restrictions from the moment he read the operation orders. But Montgomery had credibility. His Eighth Army had broken Rommel at El Alamein. His troops were experienced, hardened by years of desert warfare. The American II Corps had stumbled badly at Kasserine Pass just months earlier. In the minds of British planners, this division of labor made perfect sense. The proven force would deliver the knockout blow while the Americans learned their trade. The initial landings went better than anyone had dared hope. Despite rough seas and scattered paratroop drops, Allied forces established their beachheads with relatively light casualties. By July 12th, Patton's forces had secured their landing zones and pushed inland. Montgomery's Eighth Army had captured Syracuse and Augusta, advancing with textbook efficiency up the coastal road. Then the terrain revealed its true nature. Sicily's interior was a defender's paradise, steep mountains, narrow valleys, limited roads that twisted through easily defended passes. The German commander, Generalleutnant Hans Valentin Hube, a veteran of the Eastern Front, understood exactly how to exploit this landscape. His 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and the Hermann Göring Panzer Division, supported by Italian coastal units, began a fighting withdrawal designed to delay the Allied advance and protect the evacuation routes to mainland Italy. By July 13th, Montgomery's advance encountered the first serious resistance at the Primosole Bridge south of Catania. What should have been a swift advance up Highway 114 ground to a halt against determined German defenders. The flat Catania plain, dominated by Mount Etna to the west, offered little room for maneuver. Every approach was covered by German machine gun positions, anti-tank guns, and artillery zeroed in on the limited road network. Montgomery made a decision that would ignite controversy for decades to come. On July 13th, he redirected the British 51st Highland Division westward onto Highway 124, a route that had been explicitly assigned to the U.S. II Corps under Major General Omar Bradley. Montgomery reasoned that if the coastal route was blocked, he needed an alternative axis of advance. Highway 124 led northwest toward Enna, and then curved back northeast toward Messina through the interior. There was only one problem. American forces were already preparing to use that very road for their own advance northward. The order came down through 15th Army Group headquarters, commanded by British General Harold Alexander. The Americans were to halt their advance, yield Highway 124 to the British, and remain in a supporting role, essentially guarding Montgomery's rear and left flank. For Patton, reading this directive at his headquarters in Gela, the message was clear and infuriating. The Americans were being pushed aside, relegated to spectators, while Montgomery claimed all the glory. On the ground, American troops who had been fighting their way forward with increasing confidence suddenly found themselves pulled back to make way for British units. The 45th Infantry Division, which had just seized several key positions, was ordered to sidestep westward. Patton's headquarters began receiving reports from field commanders asking, quite simply, what they were supposed to do now. The entire American 7th Army, over 66,000 combat troops, was effectively frozen in place. Patton exploded in rage. His diary entries from those days are filled with barely contained fury at what he saw as British arrogance and a deliberate slight against American military competence. But beneath the anger was something deeper, a gnawing fear that American forces would finish the campaign without proving themselves, that the narrative of the war would forever cast them as junior partners who couldn't deliver when it mattered most. Meanwhile, Montgomery's advance continued to bog down. The Germans had no intention of making anything easy. At Primosole Bridge, British paratroopers fought a desperate four-day battle against counterattacking German forces. Every village, every ridge, every stone farmhouse became a miniature fortress. The Hermann Göring Division, though roughly handled in the opening days, fought with the skill and tenacity that characterized German forces throughout the war. By July 17th, Montgomery's grand flanking movement through the interior had gained barely 20 miles, and Catania remained firmly in German hands. The tactical situation was becoming clear to anyone willing to see it objectively. The eastern coastal route was a killing ground, and the interior roads were choked with mountains and German resistance. But there was another route, the northern coastal highway that ran along Sicily's north shore. This road led through Palermo in the west, then curved east along the coast directly to Messina. It was longer in distance, but potentially faster because it bypassed the German main defensive positions entirely. That route lay squarely in the American sector. By July 17th, the Allied campaign had reached an operational crisis. Montgomery's vaunted 8th Army, the formation that was supposed to deliver swift victory, was stuck in brutal attritional fighting around Catania. Daily gains were measured in hundreds of yards, purchased with hundreds of casualties. The Germans were executing a masterful defensive withdrawal, trading space for time while they prepared their main defensive positions across the narrow mountain passes leading to Messina. At 15th Army Group headquarters, General Alexander faced an uncomfortable reality. The plan wasn't working. The British weren't going to reach Messina quickly via their assigned route. The campaign that was supposed to be a triumphant demonstration of Allied power was turning into a grinding slog that would give the Germans time to evacuate their forces to fight another day in Italy. Patton saw his moment. On July 17th, he flew to Alexander's headquarters with a proposal that was audacious, risky, and calculated to appeal to both military necessity and Alexander's growing desperation for results. Patton requested permission to take Palermo, Sicily's capital and largest port city, located on the northwestern coast. The city itself had limited strategic value. The Germans had already largely withdrawn from western Sicily. But Palermo was psychologically significant, and more importantly, its capture would position American forces for a drive eastward along the northern coast, road directly toward Messina. Alexander, a diplomatic commander who sought to maintain Allied harmony even when it cost operational efficiency, recognized both the military logic and the political necessity of Patton's proposal. The Americans needed a mission that allowed them to contribute meaningfully to the campaign. Alexander gave his approval with one critical addition. After taking Palermo, Patton's forces would drive east along Highway 113, the northern coastal road, toward Messina. For the first time since the invasion began, Patton had his chance. He immediately ordered Major General Lucien Truscott's 3rd Infantry Division and Major General Geoffrey Keyes' Provisional Corps to drive northwest toward Palermo at maximum speed. What followed was a masterclass in mobile warfare that stunned friend and foe alike. Patton unleashed the kind of aggressive, fast-moving advance that he had dreamed of executing since before the invasion. American columns raced across western Sicily, bypassing resistance, moving day and night, covering distances that seemed impossible in the mountainous terrain. Patton himself drove from unit to unit, appearing at forward positions, demanding faster movement, tolerating no delays. His message was simple and direct: get to Palermo and get there now. On July 22nd, just 5 days after receiving permission to advance, American forces entered Palermo. The 3rd Infantry Division rolled through the city streets to cheering crowds as Italian defenders surrendered en masse. Patton entered the city in triumph, establishing his headquarters in the ornate royal palace. The headlines back home proclaimed an American victory. Newsreels showed smiling American soldiers distributing rations to grateful Sicilian civilians. But Patton wasn't finished. He barely paused in Palermo before pivoting his entire force eastward. Now the real race would begin, a race along Highway 113 toward Messina, competing directly with Montgomery's forces grinding forward through the mountains to the south. The question was no longer whether Americans could fight, but whether they could beat the British to the prize. Montgomery, still struggling through the Catania defenses, suddenly realized what was happening. The Americans, whom he had sidelined as supporting players, were now in position to steal the show entirely. British forces redoubled their efforts, but the terrain and German resistance remained unyielding. The 8th Army was paying a terrible price for every mile, while Patton's forces were racing along the coast with increasing momentum. The drive east from Palermo became one of the most competitive operations in Allied military history, not because the Allies were fighting each other, but because two powerful egos and national prides were now racing toward the same objective. Patton made it clear to his commanders: 7th Army would reach Messina first, regardless of what it took. The northern coastal route presented its own challenges. Highway 113 clung to the coastline, winding around cliff faces and through small fishing villages. The Germans, though thinly spread in this sector, defended every advantageous position. They demolished bridges, triggered landslides to block the road, and established machine gun nests in the rocky terrain overlooking the highway. Each obstacle forced American engineers to work under fire to clear the route. Patton demanded results. He ordered amphibious end runs, small-scale landings behind German POs. Missions that forced the defenders to withdraw or be cut off. On the night of August 8th, the 30th Infantry Regiment conducted an amphibious assault east of Sant'Agata, landing behind German lines and compelling a retreat. Similar operations followed at Brolo on August 11th, though this one nearly ended in disaster when German forces counterattacked before the seaborne troops could link up with the main advance. Only desperate fighting and naval gunfire support prevented the operation from becoming a costly failure. Despite these setbacks, the pace of the American advance was remarkable. Patton pushed his division commanders relentlessly. Sleep was a luxury no one could afford. Supply columns moved round the clock. Artillery was kept close to the advancing infantry, ready to suppress any German resistance immediately. The 3rd Infantry Division, bearing the brunt of the fighting, advanced through exhaustion and casualties, knowing that their commanding general would accept nothing less than maximum effort. To the south, Montgomery's forces finally broke through the Catania defenses in early August and began advancing northward through the mountain passes. The fighting remained brutal. German rearguards defended every defensible position with textbook efficiency, withdrawing only when outflanked or in danger of being overrun. The Canadians and British troops of the 8th Army fought with courage and determination, but the terrain and enemy skill made rapid advance impossible. By August 15th, both Allied forces were closing on Messina from different directions. Patton, obsessed with being first, was monitoring reports hourly. He ordered his lead units to push through the night if necessary. The prize was within reach, and he would not be denied. On the morning of August 17, 1943, at 10:15 hours, a patrol from the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division's 7th Regiment entered Messina's outskirts. By early afternoon, American troops had secured the city center. Patton arrived shortly afterward, establishing himself in the city as German forces completed their evacuation across the Strait of Messina to mainland Italy. Montgomery's forces arrived in Messina several hours later, having fought their way through the final mountain passes. The British had suffered more casualties, covered more difficult terrain, and faced stronger resistance throughout the campaign, but the symbolic victory, the race to Messina, belonged to the Americans. The Sicily Campaign officially ended on August 17, 1943, with the capture of Messina. In 38 days of fighting, Allied forces had conquered an island defended by over 300,000 Axis troops. The cost had been significant, approximately 5,500 Allied soldiers killed, with thousands more wounded or missing. German and Italian casualties were higher, though exact numbers remain disputed, with over 140,000 Axis prisoners taken. But the operational outcome was mixed. While the Allies had secured Sicily, they had failed to trap and destroy the Axis forces. In one of the war's most successful evacuation operations, German commanders had evacuated over 100,000 troops, along with vehicles, equipment, and supplies, across the Strait of Messina to fight another day in the Italian campaign. The Allies' failure to prevent this evacuation would cost them dearly in the bloody fighting up the Italian peninsula that followed. The controversy over Montgomery's sidelining of American forces and Patton's race to Messina had lasting implications. For the American military, Sicily was a coming-of-age moment. U.S. forces had proven they could execute complex operations, overcome determined resistance, and compete on equal terms with their more experienced British allies. The campaign boosted American confidence and established Patton as a commander of vision and drive, however personally flawed he might be. For Montgomery, the campaign revealed limitations that would become more apparent in subsequent operations. His methodical, set-piece approach worked brilliantly when he had overwhelming superiority and time to prepare, but it struggled against adaptive enemies in difficult terrain. His tendency to request operational priority and resources while delivering slower-than-promised results frustrated American commanders and planted seeds of discord that would complicate Allied cooperation through the remainder of the war. The relationship between British and American commanders never fully recovered from the Sicily experience. Patton's diary and private correspondence revealed deep bitterness toward what he saw as British condescension and operational selfishness. American military planners became increasingly determined to assert equal partnership in operational planning, leading to the command arrangements in Normandy, where American and British forces operated under separate army groups with genuine equality of mission. General Harold Alexander, caught between Montgomery's demands and Patton's ambitions, learned hard lessons about coalition warfare. His subsequent command of Allied forces in Italy showed greater awareness of the need to balance national sensitivities with operational requirements, though the mountains of Italy would humble both British and American forces alike. The race to Messina entered American military lore as proof that U.S. forces could execute mobile, aggressive operations against skilled opponents. Patton became an American icon, the general who wouldn't be denied, who fought both the enemy and his own allies' low expectations. The campaign established patterns of American military thinking, emphasizing speed, mobility, and aggressive offensive action that would characterize U.S. operations through the Northwest Europe campaign. The capture of Sicily opened the door to Italy, but it also revealed the complications of coalition warfare when pride and ambition compete with strategic objectives. Montgomery's decision to sideline American forces and Patton's dramatic race to prove American capability shaped not just the Sicily Campaign, but the entire character of Allied cooperation for the remainder of the war. The question, why did Monty sideline U.S. forces in Sicily, has a complex answer involving strategy, ego, national pride, and the hard lessons learned when allies must fight together while competing for glory. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.